The black sea of space stretched endlessly, lit only by distant stars and the cold glow of burning wrecks. The battle had been short but violent. Two fleets, one human, one alien, had crossed paths near the neutral zone. Both sides had sworn to avoid this territory, but war has a way of ignoring promises. Among the scattered debris floated a small human ship, broken in half like a toy smashed by careless hands. Its hull plates were ripped apart, wires hung loose like torn veins, and oxygen hissed into the void. Inside, silence ruled, except for the faint crackle of dying systems. The alien medical vessel Tiraven drifted closer, its sleek silver form glowing with soft lights. Unlike warships, it carried no weapons. Its mission was simple: heal, rescue, preserve life. The crew belonged to the Valari, a species known for their wisdom and compassion. To the Valari, war was madness, but even madness left victims, and someone had to pick up the broken pieces. Dr. Serene, chief of the medical team, adjusted her long robes as the ship's scanners swept the wreck. Her delicate hands trembled when the results appeared. Life signs. Faint. But there, she whispered. One survivor. The crew gasped. To survive such destruction was rare. They locked a tractor beam on the wreck and pulled it closer. Their medbay preparing for the arrival of what they expected would be a body in final moments. When they cut through the twisted hull and carried the survivor inside, the Valari stood frozen in shock. The human was a man, his body a ruin of injuries. His chest rose and fell with painful slowness. Bones jutted at unnatural angles beneath torn skin. His face was pale, his breaths shallow. 17 fractures, a young medic reported, voice shaking. Ribs, arms, legs, crushed spine. He should be dead already. Dr. Serene bent over the man, scanning him again and again, refusing to believe the numbers. The Valari had fragile frames. A single broken bone often demanded weeks of treatment. To them, pain was unbearable, trauma unthinkable. And yet this human still clung to life, as if the universe itself had no power to pull him away. They placed him on the med bed. Machines hummed, screens lit with warnings. The crew whispered prayers in their own tongue. No one believed he would last more than a few breaths. Then his eyelids fluttered. The Valari drew back in fright. His gaze, weak but steady, swept across the alien faces around him. His lips cracked into a small, crooked grin. In a voice rough as gravel, he muttered, "Oh, that's just a scratch." Gasps filled the medbay. The young medic nearly dropped her instruments. Scratch? His body is destroyed. Dr. Serene leaned closer, disbelief in her large silver eyes. Human, can you hear me? You are broken. Many of your bones. 17 at least. The man's laugh was faint but clear. 17? Guess I've got a new record. He coughed and pain shook his body, yet his grin returned. I've walked off worse. The Valari could not comprehend. Pain should have crushed him. Shock should have silenced him. Instead, he joked. What is your name? Serene asked gently, curious about this strange creature who refused to surrender. Captain Marcus Hale, he rasped. United Earth Fleet. His eyes darted around. Ship's gone, isn't it? Yes, she said softly. You are the only survivor. Silence hung heavy, but Marcus only nodded. Figures. Lucky me. The Valari looked at one another, confused. To them, survival in such pain was not luck, it was punishment. Yet the human seemed calm, almost amused. Dr. Serene felt torn between duty and fear. Could their healing machines even save him? Would he collapse in seconds? Or was there something more, something hidden inside the human form that science had not understood? Captain Hale, she said carefully, we must sedate you. The pain will be too great. Please rest. Marcus shook his head weakly. No drugs. Just patch me up enough so I can stand." "Stand!" the medic exclaimed. "You cannot even move! Your body is shattered!" "Standing never needed a perfect body," Marcus replied, his voice sharp despite weakness. "It only needs will." "The—" Valari murmured nervously. To them his words were madness. Will could not mend broken bones. Will could not stop blood loss. Yet they sensed a strange power in him. Not magic, not technology, but sheer determination. Dr. Serene hesitated. In her long career, she had healed hundreds of patients from across the stars. None had ever looked death in the face and smiled as this human did. She leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. "Why do you fight the pain?" Marcus opened his, eyes fully, and for a moment his strength shone through the broken shell of his body. "Because pain isn't the end. It's just a reminder I'm still alive." The words settled in the medbay like a heavy stone. The Valari stared, silent, shaken. The monitors beeped louder as his heart struggled, but Marcus did not flinch. Instead, he tried to push himself up, though his arms shook and refused. The medics rushed to stop him. "Lie down! You will destroy yourself!" He chuckled again. "Already destroyed. But as long as I breathe, I'm still in the fight. Doctor." Serene touched his shoulder gently, urging him to stay still. Yet inside, her mind raced. The Valari had always believed pain was to be avoided. Suffering was a curse. But this human, he treated it as nothing more than weather to walk through. She realized she was not only treating a patient, she was witnessing something profound, something her people had never understood. As the medics stabilized Marcus with careful hands, he closed his eyes, still smiling faintly. "Wake me if something important happens," he murmured, "like coffee or another fight." Dr. Serene stared at him, her heart filled with awe and fear. The alien doctors had discovered a body broken beyond belief, but within it lived a spirit stronger than any steel. And though they did not know it yet, this man's survival would change how they saw humanity forever. The medbay of the alien vessel Tiraven was a place of silence and order. For the Valari, healing was almost sacred, a science blended with ceremony. Their patients usually lay calm and quiet, trusting the machines, resting while their bones and organs were repaired. But today was different. Today, they had a human. Captain Marcus Hale was not calm. He was restless, awake, and stubborn. The monitors above his bed screamed with warnings, fractures, muscle tears, internal bleeding, but Marcus acted as if he had merely stubbed a toe. "Captain Hale, please," Dr. Serene said, her voice trembling with a mix of irritation and worry. "You must lie still. Your bones are unstable." Marcus grinned through pale lips. "If I lie still any longer, I'll grow roots. You said you've got advanced medicine. Then hurry up and patch me. I've got work to do." The Valari medics glanced at one another in disbelief. To them, 17 fractures was beyond work. It was the end of movement, the edge of life. No Valari would even think of standing with such damage. They could not understand how this human was even awake. One young medic named Thalen whispered, "Doctor, he should be unconscious. His pain levels are impossible." Marcus chuckled faintly. "Pain's just a reminder I'm still breathing. Ignore it long enough, and it gets shy." The Valari flinched. They could not imagine ignoring pain. To them, pain demanded surrender. Yet this human joked with broken bones like a child scraped a knee. Serene sighed and activated the surgical drones. "Begin stabilization," she ordered. "We will at least repair his lungs and stop internal bleeding. The rest may take cycles." The drones descended, shining sterile light over Marcus's battered frame. They worked quickly, sealing ruptured veins, setting shattered ribs with glowing clamps, repairing torn tissue. The medics winced at every cut, but Marcus never asked for sedation. Instead, he watched, his eyes sharp despite exhaustion. You Valari are good with tools. Better than our field medics. But your faces, you look like you're about to faint. Thalen blinked. How can you remain awake? You should be screaming. Marcus smirked. Trust me, kid, I've done enough screaming in my life. Doesn't help much. You breathe, you focus, you get through it. That's all. The medics scribbled notes in their consoles. To them, this was more than healing. It was discovery. They had studied hundreds of species, cataloged biology across stars, but none had ever behaved like this human. His nerves should have sent him into shock. His heart should have failed. Yet he remained steady, even cracking jokes. Dr. Serene leaned closer. Captain Hale, is this normal? Do all humans endure like this? Marcus's laugh was tired, but honest. I'm not special. Any human would push through if it mattered. We're stubborn that way. Serene tilted her head. But why? Pain is a warning. It means stop, rest, wait. Maybe for you, Marcus replied. For us, pain just means we're not finished yet. The words echoed in the med bay like a strange kind of truth. The Valari exchanged nervous glances. Their species had built entire philosophies on avoiding pain, on treating it as a curse to be erased. But this human, he treated it like background noise. Thalen whispered, if this is true, then humanity is different. Dangerous. Marcus gave him a wink. Dangerous, sure, but also useful. You want someone to survive the impossible? Call a human. Dr. Serene studied him, both disturbed and fascinated. You cannot mean to say that pain does not control you. Of course it does, Marcus admitted. Hurts like hell, but control isn't the same as command. Pain can shout all it wants. I just don't let it drive. The Valari fell silent again, struggling to make sense of such thinking. Their own people would never accept this. But the evidence lay right before them. A human with 17 broken bones, calmly teaching them that pain was not a wall, but a door. As the surgery ended, Marcus sat up slightly, ignoring the protests of the machines. His ribs were bound, his lungs stable, but many fractures still waited to be repaired. Even so, he reached for the edge of the bed as if preparing to rise. Captain Hale! Serene cried. Do not move! Your skeleton is fragile! Marcus smirked. Fragile, huh? Maybe to you. To me it's just a bit rattled. He tried to swing his legs over the side. The medics rushed to hold him down, horrified. Why? Serene demanded. Why do you fight to stand? Marcus's grin softened into something more serious. Because standing means I'm not beaten, and I promised my crew I'd never quit. They're gone now, but promises still matter. The Valari felt something stir inside them, an emotion they rarely touched, respect. In their culture, survival was a matter of protection and caution. For this human, survival was a choice, even in the jaws of death. Thalen muttered almost to himself, he is not a patient. He is a phenomenon. Dr. Serene agreed silently. She had expected to save a dying man. Instead, she had found a living lesson. Still, her duty remained. She pressed Marcus gently back onto the bed. You are remarkable, Captain Hale. But even miracles need time to heal. Allow us to finish our work. Do this not for yourself, but for those promises you keep. Marcus studied her eyes, then finally relaxed with a faint smile. Fine, Doc, but no more sedation talk. I like my coffee strong and my surgeries sober. The medics almost laughed, though it was nervous laughter. This human was rewriting everything they believed about life, pain, and willpower. And somewhere, deep inside, each Valari knew this was only the beginning, because Captain Marcus Hale was not just surviving. He was teaching them what it meant to be human. The medbay of the Tiraven was quiet except for the steady hum of machines. Alien doctors moved carefully between glowing consoles and hovering drones, their long robes whispering across the floor. For them, healing was a slow and sacred process. Patients were expected to lie still, silent, and obedient, but Captain Marcus Hale was not that kind of patient. 3 days after his rescue, his body still carried 17 fractures. Though some had been partially repaired, many remained unstable. The Valari doctors insisted on keeping him in bed, surrounded by life support equipment. Marcus, however, refused to behave like a fragile thing. When Dr. Serene entered the room, she found him sitting upright, studying the glowing medical screens as though he were part of the staff. His chest still ached, his arms wrapped in support bands, but his eyes burned with restless energy. "You should be resting," Serene scolded gently. "Movement is dangerous. Your body is not ready." Marcus smirked. "Resting's overrated. Besides, if I stay flat too long, I'll forget how to walk. Can't let that happen." She frowned, lowering her voice. "Captain Hale, do you understand the severity of your injuries? Your bones are weak. You should not even be awake." "Doc," Marcus said, leaning back with a sigh, "humans don't get the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions. We keep moving, even when it hurts. Sometimes, especially when it hurts." His words unsettled her. For Valari, pain was the ultimate warning, a command to stop, but Marcus treated it like background noise. She studied him for a long moment before asking softly, "Why do your people endure like this? Why do you not surrender when pain tells you to stop?" Marcus gave a faint laugh. "Because pain isn't the end. It's just a signal. You can listen to it, sure, but you don't have to obey it." The younger medics nearby exchanged uneasy glances. To them, the idea was almost terrifying. To imagine ignoring pain was to imagine ignoring survival itself. Marcus noticed their faces and decided to explain further. "Back on Earth, we've had firefighters run into burning buildings with broken ribs, soldiers crawling with shattered legs, explorers climbing mountains with frostbitten hands. They don't stop because stopping means failure, and failure costs more than pain." Thalen, the youngest medic, whispered, "That cannot be possible. How could anyone climb with broken bones?" Marcus shrugged. "One step at a time. Focus on the goal, not the pain. Pain screams loud, but if you've got a reason, you can scream louder." Dr. Serene shook her head slowly. "We have studied many species, but none have ever spoken this way. To us, pain means fragility. To you, it seems to mean strength." "Not strength," Marcus corrected. "Choice. You choose what matters more, the pain or the mission. Humans just choose differently than most." The Valari fell silent, absorbing his words like students before a teacher. To them, Marcus was more than a patient now. He was a lesson in survival, a living contradiction to everything they believed. As the hours passed, Marcus continued to share stories. He told them of mountain climbers who lost fingers to frost, but reached the summit anyway. He described astronauts who pushed through injuries to finish repairs in space. He even mentioned ordinary people, farmers, miners, workers, who carried on despite broken bones or illnesses simply because their families depended on them. The Valari listened in awe and horror. To them, such endurance bordered on madness. Yet they could not deny the evidence lying before them. Marcus himself. At one point, while the drones adjusted his bandages, he winced but forced a smile. "See? Pain's just part of the job description." Serene finally asked the question that haunted her. "But why? Why suffer at all? Why not surrender and wait for healing?" Marcus's eyes softened. "Because sometimes waiting means people die. Back home, we've learned that pain is temporary, but quitting lasts forever. I promised my crew I'd fight to the end. That promise doesn't vanish just because I'm hurting." The words struck deep. Promises were sacred to the Valari too, but never at such cost. They healed with patience, protected themselves with care. Humans, it seemed, protected with stubbornness. Later that evening, Thalin approached Marcus with hesitation. "Captain Hale," he said quietly, "if I had even one broken bone, I would remain still until healed. Yet you, with 17, you teach us as if nothing has happened. Do all humans live this way?" Marcus chuckled. "Not all. Some whine about a paper cut. But when it matters, yeah, most of us can push through. It's not about being fearless. It's about being too stubborn to stop." The young medic lowered, his gaze whispering, Perhaps your people are stronger than we imagined." Marcus shook his head. "Not stronger, just different. Pain doesn't make us heroes. Choosing to keep going does." That night, as the Valari recorded their notes, Dr. Serene looked at the human sleeping uneasily on the medbed. His body twitched with discomfort, his breath shallow, but his expression was calm. She realized then that they were not just treating a patient. They were studying an idea that humans could bend, break, bleed, and still keep moving. And though the Valari could not yet understand it, they felt a seed of respect growing inside them. For the first time, they wondered if this strange resilience was the true strength of humanity, the secret that had carried their kind across stars. They had thought they were saving Marcus Hale, but perhaps it was he who was saving them, teaching them that survival was not the absence of pain, but the courage to endure it. The Valari medical ship Tiraven drifted peacefully in the neutral zone, its hull glowing like a lantern in the dark. Inside, the doctors worked with steady hands, still fascinated by the strange human who refused to yield to pain. For 3 days they had watched Captain Marcus Hale, and for 3 days he had continued to surprise them. But peace in space never lasted long. The first signs of danger came in the form of a faint tremor across the ship's sensors. A warning light blinked, red in the command bay. The Valari navigator stiffened, his voice shaking. "Unidentified ships. Approaching fast." Dr. Serene rushed to the console. The readings chilled her blood. The signatures were hostile. Raiders, scavengers who preyed on weak ships, especially defenseless ones like the Tiraven. "We have no weapons," the navigator whispered. "We must flee." But their engines were slow. The raiders would catch them easily. The announcement reached the medbay. Marcus, half sitting on his bed with bandages still binding his ribs, tilted his head as he overheard the panicked whispers. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice calm. Dr. Serene hurried in, her silver eyes filled with fear. "Raiders are coming. They will board us. We cannot fight them. We must hope they spare the wounded." Marcus chuckled dryly. "Hope's a poor shield." He swung his legs off the bed, ignoring the sharp stab of pain from his fractures. Serene rushed to stop him. "Captain Hale, you cannot move! Your body is still broken!" He gritted his teeth, forcing himself upright. "Doc, broken doesn't mean useless. I won't sit here and wait for raiders to slaughter you. If you can't, fight I will!" The medics gasped. To them, the idea was madness. He could barely walk, yet he spoke of fighting. But Marcus's eyes burned with the same fire they had seen since the first day. A refusal to surrender. "Listen," Marcus said firmly, gripping the edge of the bed for balance. "You've got corridors, doors, and walls. That means you can hold them off. You just need someone who knows how." Dr. Serene's voice shook. "But you cannot even stand without pain." Marcus gave a grim smile. "Pain doesn't stop me. It never has. Now get me something to brace these bones. An exosuit, armor, anything. And I'll show you how humans fight when the odds are impossible." The Valari exchanged nervous looks. Their instincts screamed at them to hide, to flee. But part of them remembered his lessons about endurance, about refusing to quit. Against all reason, they began to believe. Within minutes, they brought Marcus, an old exosuit used for heavy lifting. The suit was bulky and imperfect, but its servos could support his broken body. With the help of trembling medics, he climbed inside. Metal plates locked around his chest, arms, and legs, stabilizing his frame. Every movement sent jolts of pain, but the suit carried most of the weight. As the helmet sealed, Marcus straightened slowly, his body trembling but his spirit unshaken. "There," he muttered. "Good as new." The Valari watched in awe. To them, it looked like a dead man walking. Yet somehow, Marcus stood tall, his posture commanding. He gathered the medics and staff, his voice steady. "Listen carefully. Raiders fight like predators, fast, loud, chaotic. That's their strength. But ships like this, they've got tight corridors, narrow spaces. That's our advantage. We turn every hallway into a choke point. We funnel them, trap them, and hit them hard." The Valari blinked in confusion. "But we are not soldiers. We do not know how to fight." "Then you'll learn," Marcus said firmly. "War isn't about strength. It's about survival. Grab. Tools, pipes, anything heavy. You don't need to be warriors. You just need to hold the line." Despite their fear, the Valari obeyed. For the first time, they prepared to resist instead of surrender. Moments later, the raider ships latched onto the Tiraven, cutting through the outer hull with molten drills. Sparks rained down as metal groaned. The Valari trembled, clutching their improvised weapons. Marcus stood at the front of the corridor, his exosuit whirring softly. His ribs screamed in protest, but he ignored them. His eyes narrowed as the first breach door fell with a crash. Dozens of raiders stormed inside, armored and armed with plasma rifles. They expected no resistance. What they found was Marcus Hale, standing like a wall of iron. "Welcome aboard," he growled. Then he charged. The exosuit's servos amplified his strikes. He slammed into the first raider, knocking the alien back into his comrades. Plasma bolts flew, but Marcus ducked behind the corridor's bend, forcing the enemy into the choke point he had chosen. "Now!" he shouted. The Valari, trembling but inspired, swung their makeshift weapons from behind cover. Pipes cracked against helmets, sparks flashed, and the raiders stumbled in shock. They had expected easy prey. Instead, they met resistance. The fight raged through the corridors. Every step was agony for Marcus, every blow a reminder of his broken body. But he pressed on, barking orders, teaching the Valari to fight as they moved. "Hold the corner. Don't let them push through. Hit them when they're close." For the first time in their history, the Valari fought, not with training, but with desperation and courage. And at the center of it all stood Marcus Hale, a Yeo, man shattered in body but unbreakable in will. By the time reinforcements from a nearby patrol finally arrived, the raiders were retreating, dragging their wounded back to their ships. The Tiraven was battered but still standing. In the silence that followed, the Valari stared at Marcus in awe. His exosuit was scorched, his body trembling inside it, but his eyes still burned with defiance. Dr. Serene whispered, "How? How did you do this? You should not even be alive." Marcus gave a tired grin. "Because sometimes, Doc, surviving isn't enough. Sometimes you've got to show the universe you're still in the fight." And with that, his legs gave way. The Valari caught him before he fell, their hands gentle, their eyes wide with newfound respect. For the first time, they understood what it meant to be human. Smoke still lingered in the corridors of the Tiraven. Panels hung loose. Sparks flickered from broken wires, and the metallic smell of scorched plating filled the air. The Valari walked carefully, their wide eyes still trembling from what had just happened. They had fought, truly fought, for the first time in their lives, and they had survived. At the center of it all was Captain Marcus Hale. He leaned heavily against the wall of the medbay as the exosuit hissed open, its mechanical arms releasing his battered body. His legs nearly gave out as he stepped forward, but he caught himself on the edge of a table. His ribs burned, his muscles screamed, and his lungs felt like fire. Yet his grin remained. Dr. Serene rushed to him, her voice sharp with concern. "You are collapsing! You cannot keep moving like this!" Marcus chuckled faintly. "Can't collapse yet? Not until we know the raiders are gone for good." "They will return," Thalen said nervously. The young medic clutched a bent metal pipe, his hand still shaking. "They will not forgive this humiliation. They will come back with more ships." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we get ready. This wasn't the end. This was the warm-up." The Velari stared at him as if he were speaking madness. How could a man with 17 broken bones talk of fighting again? How could he, barely standing, think about war when most of them wanted to hide? Serene placed her hand gently on his arm. "Captain Hale, your body cannot endure another battle. You must heal. Please, let us—" "No time," Marcus interrupted firmly. "You don't win by waiting. You win by preparing. Those raiders thought you were weak, and you proved them wrong. But next time, they'll come harder. We've got to be ready to hold." The Velari looked at each other nervously. Their species had never been warriors. They healed, they studied, they avoided conflict. But something had changed inside them during the fight. For the first time, they had tasted what it meant to resist. And for the first time, they had seen courage alive in human form. Marcus limped forward, his hand dragging along the wall for balance. "I'll teach you. You don't need to be soldiers. You just need to think like survivors." And so began the strangest training session in Velari history. Training the healers, in the wide corridor outside the medbay, Marcus directed the Velari with slow, careful movements. Every gesture cost him strength, but his voice was strong, commanding. "You don't fight raiders with strength. You fight with brains. See this corridor? Narrow space. Perfect choke point. 2 of you here with pipes can hold back 5 of them if you stay steady. 1 of you stays behind to support." He showed them how to use overturned tables as barricades, how to angle their improvised weapons for maximum effect, how to strike not with rage but with timing. The Velari copied his motions awkwardly, their hands trembling, but Marcus encouraged them with a grin. "Not bad. You're learning. Remember, raiders expect fear. Show them resistance, and they lose balance. That's when you hit back." The Velari began to gain confidence. They practiced moving in pairs, blocking doors, and even distracting attackers. To them, it felt clumsy and frightening, but to Marcus, it was progress. "Good," he said at last, leaning heavily against the wall. "You're starting to think like fighters. Not because you want to fight, but because you have no choice. Survival means doing the hard thing even when you're scared." The Velari nodded slowly. For them, fear had always meant retreat. But now they began to see it differently. Fear could also mean readiness. The second wave, their training was cut short by the alarm. The ship shuddered as new raider vessels locked onto the hull. The Velari froze in terror. Marcus pushed himself upright, his body screaming in protest. "Positions! You know what to do! Hold the lines!" The corridors filled with footsteps as raiders cut through once again. This time they came prepared. More soldiers, heavier weapons. Plasma bolts lit the air with searing flashes. The Velari braced behind barricades, gripping pipes and tools with trembling hands. They remembered Marcus's words. Choke points, timing, courage. Marcus himself stood at the front once more, the exosuit reactivated around his broken body. Every step sent agony through him, but he refused to fall. His voice thundered through the comms. "Hold steady! Wait for them to push in, then strike!" The first raiders stormed through the breach. Plasma bolts struck the barricades, scorching, metal. The Velari ducked, terrified, but Marcus roared, "Now!" The Velari swung as one, striking the raiders off balance. Sparks flew, armor dented, and the corridor became a trap, just as Marcus had promised. For hours, the battle raged. Marcus fought like a storm, his exosuit amplifying his movements, his broken body hidden beneath layers of iron will. The Valeri followed his lead, their fear slowly replaced by determination. Even as the corridors filled with smoke and fire, they refused to yield. The turning point. At one point, a raider leader forced his way through, towering above the defenders. His armor glowed, his weapon humming with deadly energy. The Valeri shrank back in fear. Marcus stepped forward, his breath ragged. "You want this ship?" he growled. "You'll have to go through me." The raider sneered and swung his weapon. Marcus caught it with the exosuit's arm, the impact jolting his broken bones. Pain tore through him, but he held firm. With a roar, he slammed his fist into the raider's chest, knocking the alien back into the wall. The Valeri gasped in awe. As their patient, the man who should have been dying stood tall against the impossible. The leader staggered, then retreated, dragging his forces with him. At last the corridors fell silent. The raiders fled once more, leaving the Tiravan scarred but undefeated. Aftermath. The Valeri dropped their weapons, their hands shaking. They were exhausted, bruised, terrified, but alive. For the first time, in their history, they had fought not with machines or medicine, but with their own courage. Marcus leaned against the wall, his exosuit sparking, his body trembling inside it. Dr. Serene rushed to him, tears in her eyes. "Captain Hale, you are destroying yourself. Why do you do this?" Marcus looked at her, his grin faint but proud. "Because someone had to stand. And if I can still breathe, then I can still fight. Simple as that." The Valeri stared at him, their fear replaced by something new, respect, and even admiration. They had learned what it meant to endure, not because they were unbreakable, but because they had seen a human who refused to be broken. And though Marcus finally collapsed into their arms, barely conscious, the Valeri knew one truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons, not its technology, but its spirit, a spirit that turned the impossible into survival. The medical bay of the Tiravan glowed with soft blue light. Machines hummed quietly as the Valeri moved about, their long fingers adjusting instruments and checking vitals. The battle was over, the raiders gone, and the corridors of the ship, though scarred and scorched, were silent once more. At the center of the medbay lay Captain Marcus Hale. His body was weak, wrapped in braces and bindings, his skin pale from exhaustion. Yet, even as the Valeri checked his vitals, a faint smile rested on his lips. He had done what no one believed possible. Dr. Serene stood beside him, her silver eyes filled with both worry and admiration. She had watched him fight with 17 broken bones. She had seen him walk through agony as if it were an old companion, and she had seen how his spirit had changed her people. When Marcus's eyes fluttered open, she spoke softly. "You should not be awake. You should be sleeping for days." Marcus coughed lightly, wincing, then smirked. "Sleeps for when? The job's done. Are the raiders gone?" "Yes," Serene said, relief in her voice. "They retreated. You drove them away. Again." "Good," Marcus whispered. "Then I can rest a little. Maybe." The younger medic Thalin, who had once trembled at the thought of fighting, stepped closer. His voice was filled with awe. "Captain Hale, how did you do it? How could you stand when your body was broken? How could you fight when pain should have ended you?" Marcus turned his tired eyes toward him. "Because pain isn't the end. It's just part of living, and because I promised myself I wouldn't quit. Promises matter." Thalen swallowed, his chest tight. "You taught us more than fighting. You showed us that survival is not just about avoiding pain, it is about choosing to stand, even when it hurts." Marcus smiled faintly. "Exactly. You've got it." A changed crew in. The days that followed, the Valeri moved through their ship differently. They walked with straighter backs, spoke with steadier voices, and carried new confidence. The fear that had once controlled them seemed smaller now. They had faced death and discovered they could resist. They began to train on their own, using the lessons Marcus had given them. They practiced building barricades, holding choke points, and working in teams. They no longer saw themselves as helpless healers. They saw themselves as protectors, too. Dr. Serene noticed the change with pride. Her people had always been gentle, but perhaps too gentle. Now, they had balance, and it was all because of one human who had refused to stay down. Still, Marcus's condition worried her. His body was a ruin, and even with their advanced medicine, recovery would take time. Yet he never complained. When she checked his vitals, he would grin and say, "Feels like a scratch." She realized that his words were more than jokes. They were symbols. To Marcus, suffering was never the end. It was just another step. The visit. Several days later, a Valari council ship arrived to meet the Tiraven. The council had heard reports of the battles. They expected to find their medical crew traumatized, perhaps even destroyed. Instead, they found survivors who spoke with pride and strength. When the council asked how this was possible, every Valari gave the same answer. The human taught us. The council entered the med bay to meet this so-called teacher. They expected a powerful warrior, perhaps armored and strong. Instead, they found a man lying on a bed, ribs bound, arms in braces, skin pale from exhaustion. One counselor frowned. "This is the human who led you?" Dr. Serene nodded firmly. "Yes, this is Captain Marcus Hale." Marcus opened one eye and smirked. "Don't mind the look. I clean up better when I'm not broken." The counselors exchanged confused looks. How could such a fragile, injured being inspire such respect? Yet the crew stood proudly around him, their eyes shining with loyalty. Thalen spoke boldly. "He taught us that pain does not command us. He taught us that fear is not the end. He showed us that the spirit of survival is stronger than the body." The counselors were silent. For the Valari, this was a revelation. Their people had always believed pain was weakness. But now, they saw a new truth. Pain could be endured if the will was strong. The Legacy-in. The weeks that followed, Marcus continued to heal slowly under Valari care. But even as his bones mended, his story spread. The tale of the human with 17 broken bones who said, "just a scratch," traveled across ships and stations. Other Valari crews began to prepare differently, no longer trusting only in avoidance, but also in resilience. They began to believe that they too could stand against the impossible. For Marcus, this was enough. He had not only survived, he had given the Valari something greater: courage. Dr. Serene often sat beside his bed studying him. "Captain." "Hale," she said one evening, "I fear my people will never look at humans the same way again." Marcus chuckled softly. "That's good. Maybe they'll stop thinking of us as fragile. We're not indestructible, but we don't go down easy. Either." She tilted her head, her voice gentle. "No, you are not fragile. You are stubborn." He laughed, then winced at the pain. "That's humanity in a word. Stubborn. The human spirit." When Marcus was finally strong enough to stand on his own, the crew gathered to watch. He rose slowly, carefully, his body still aching. But when he stood upright, the Valari cheered softly, their voices filled with pride. Dr. Serene smiled at him. "Captain Hale, you should know. You have changed us. We are no longer only healers. We are protectors too." Marcus gave a tired grin. "Good. That's all I ever wanted. For you to see that strength isn't about muscles or weapons. It's about refusing to quit." As he looked around the med bay at the faces of the Valari who had fought beside him, Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction. His ship and crew were gone, but his mission had not been wasted. He had given something valuable to these aliens, something that would outlast him, a lesson written not in books, but in scars. Epilogue. Years later, stories of the Battle of the Tiravan became legend. Children of the Valari grew up hearing of the human who survived the impossible, who laughed at pain, who stood when broken. And whenever one of them faced hardship, they whispered the same words he had once spoken. "It's just a scratch." For in the endless darkness of space, it was not strength of body that inspired them, but strength of spirit. And no one embodied that spirit better than Captain Marcus Hale, a human who proved that sometimes the greatest weapon in the galaxy was simply the will to keep going.